Good evening. I'm Dr. Greenbrier Almond, and thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Each week on Channel 3, I'm happy to talk about this interface between Christianity and medicine. And tonight, I'm going to be talking about my own feelings related to a grief and loss experience. I'm not the only one going through this in our community, but I thought that it was appropriate to talk about the life of William Wellings, Bud Wellings, and what he meant to me personally. And of course, you can extrapolate and also hear other stories from other people about what Bud and Linda and their family have meant to us here in Buchanan over the years. Each of our tales are personal, and I do this with respect for the family and for the recent funeral, Bud having just passed away on a Friday morning of this past week. And we had the funeral service at the First United Methodist Church on Sunday, just the other day. And I do this also reflecting back that I remember when Dr. Bill Hallam passed away, a retired emeritus professor at West Virginia Wesleyan College, one of the great graybeards of the college. And my father came on our program, the same program, Tender Loving Care, and wanted to talk about Bill Hallam and what he meant in his own life, how he was a one-person mathematics department at West Virginia Wesleyan, and how he brought some aviation skills to our community, how he brought actually the Army to use Wesleyan during World War II as a training facility, and so many stories, wonderful stories of Bill Hallam. And I got a lot of kudos from other people in the community that Dad had come to talk about his feelings after Bill Hallam's death. I thought it was appropriate to try to do something like that, especially with the life of someone dynamic like Bud Wellings. Bud and I go back a long ways. I remember when we first came back to Buchanan, I had married in 1975, meeting my wife down in Charleston, West Virginia, where we were both studying medicine, both becoming specialists. She was studying, Rashley was studying pediatrics, and I was studying psychiatry. And so we came back to Buchanan to begin our life here and to set up our practice. And one of the first people that we met through our church connection, First United Methodist Church, was Bud and Linda Wellings. And they were coming to Buchanan for the first time. Bud was a pilot, a genius of sorts in mechanics and computers and all things electronic, and so he was a valuable to Mr. Clark and his enterprise. I think it was Basin Surveys at that time, and so we hit it off immediately. We in fact we were in the same Sunday school class, and Herb Stotts was our teacher. Later on, Herb passed away, and then I took over the teaching, and we co-taught, a number of us. But one time Bud actually introduced me to another person and said, "Oh, this is my Sunday school teacher," and that was a very special comment, because Bud actually aspired to be a preacher, a Presbyterian preacher, and when he came to Buchanan with Linda, they found the Presbyterian church welcoming, and they enjoyed their fellowship there, but they felt the music ministry and their contribution they could make would be greater at the First United Methodist Church, and so they began to worship there with us, and that's where our relationship began. So many stories to tell, but I want to. We all know Stonewall Jackson, don't we? And what he has meant to us locally, and Bud was in a way a Stonewall for myself and for our family. And on one occasion, when my wife and I were struggling with our son Ronce, who's now an attorney in Washington, D.C., and he was choosing the wrong friends, if you will. They're not bad people, but friends that we felt might get him into trouble in some way. And Bud and Linda, as we were meeting at their house, picnicking and enjoying fellowship, had a chance to talk to Ronce and shared several insights from the teaching of Stonewall Jackson. Bud and Linda were well-grounded, and I understood from Linda's comments about the time of the funeral that they have read over the Bible a number of times together, reading each time a different translation of the Bible, a different version of the Bible, and getting deeper and deeper in their faith, and so it was no surprise that Bud would know something about Stonewall Jackson. And he told the story, and this is the book that he gave us, Stonewall Jackson's Books of Maxims. He told the story of Stonewall Jackson, and one of his most frequent comments that he made as he led men and as he developed his own faith, as he was a Sunday school teacher. And this was that a man is known by the company for which he keeps. And so this was a lesson we were trying to get Ronce to understand, that you're known by your friends, you're known by the company you keep. And this was a maxim that apparently Stonewall Jackson and Bud knew about from Euripides in Timidae, a book, early Greek literature. Not something I guess you would know if you're going to be a Presbyterian minister, as you understand Greek and Hebrew and understand deeper things. But Bud recalled, every man is like the company he is wont to keep, a teaching of Euripides. He recalled Cervantes, who said that, tell me what company you keepeth, and I'll tell you who you are. And Stonewall Jackson, again, leading men, becoming a stone wall, someone who would not give in. He ordered his soldiers to stand firm in battle, and they did, and they followed their leader. This is probably a lesson he learned in Clarksburg, community outside of Clarksburg, where he grew up with his grandparents. We now call it Jackson's Mill. But Jackson recalled that a man's mind is known by the company he keeps. And another time he said, we are in truth more than half what we are by imitation. So we imitate those. If we want to choose friends, we're wise to choose friends who are greater than us. And certainly I think in Bud's case, he was leading me, even though he called me his teacher in Sunday school. He was keeping company with our Sunday school class and doing so much all the time in our community. But he was an inspiration. He was leading us, and we became the company that benefited from him. Hopefully, in some way, his family benefited from their relationship with us. But this was a persistent theme, and something that I learned from Bud Wellings about Stonewall Jackson, and a key lesson I'm sure my son would know even today about Bud. Another thing that came to mind, and this came out of the funeral, but I remembered after it was spoken that Bud held on to this tenaciously. And I guess what I'm saying as I recall these memories is that Bud was a most persistent person, and we all benefited from that persistence. The headlines of our newspaper on Monday were how we benefited because of his involvement in the airport, and how he hung in there when people wondered if we could ever have an airport here. And he led the way, he led the charge for so many years. In fact, we have a grand airport, and he has plans to make it even grander. And I'm sure that eventually these things will happen because Bud laid out a great foundation for us. But he clung to a verse of the Bible from Micah, the 6th chapter, the 8th verse. What does the Lord require of you? To seek justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. We've shared that memory around Bud, how he hung to those sayings, and I'm going to take them apart, but to seek justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. I'll give you an example from my own life again, things the community may or may not know about, but certainly this idea of justice and doing what's right, especially for those who have borne the battle. Much of my life has been involved with taking care of veterans, and Bud was instrumental in us getting together a teaching tape for family doctors, which has gone around West Virginia, has gone around the world. In fact, I'll be teaching from these same lessons this September in the Shenandoah Valley about post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a presentation I'm called upon to give. But Bud was the first to say, Greenbrier, you ought to get this down in a disc. And that Carnegie Mellon University of Pittsburgh has a computer program in which you can have PowerPoint, you can have your lecture, you can have computer references, and you can have questions that are pertinent to the lesson that's being presented. You can have those on split screens. Bud was quick to point out, and technically this is possible, and we can do it right here in Buchanan. And he knew that Linda could do it through her enterprise, and at that time he had CIE, which I think stands for Commercial Industrial Electronics, as a company that he had founded. And so we began to film what is a powerful teaching tape. It was given credit by the National Family Practice Organization for teaching doctors how to treat patients with PTSD. I was the teacher on the tape, but Bud was the person behind the production. And he was very detailed about getting it right. I mean, we filmed, and my words might be right, but then he'd say, there's a shadow here, we need to do it again. And we get the look to look right. Maybe the sound quality wasn't quite right, let's get the sound right, and so forth. We made posters and used them for the PowerPoint. It's a well-done documentation about post-traumatic stress disorder, and the fact that we did it right here in Buchanan and that it's become a powerful tape is a credit to Bud Wellings. So I use that as a first example that I wanted to say that Bud Wellings carried out Micah 6:8 to seek justice. What does the Lord require of you? To seek justice. He was interested in this topic. He was interested in my presenting the topic and this being done in a professional way because justice needs to be done for our veterans, those who have borne the battle, and the widow and the orphan. As Abraham Lincoln said wisely when he established the principle that has become the Department of Veterans Affairs. We need not and dare not forget those who bore the battle. We need justice for them. And the teaching tape, like he instituted, was part of that effort. Another part of this verse, as we talked about this at the funeral home on Saturday, about loving kindness. Loving kindness. Bud is a very kind and dedicated person. I've known that all my life. I remember when I first knew him, and part of what, as I mentioned before, he was drawn to our church was music ministry. We sang together in the Buchanan Choral Society, and I enjoyed Bud in the choir. I enjoyed him being interested in music, a music ministry that he shared with his family. It was a gift of love, a loving kindness. I want to take a moment and as I talk like this about Bud Wellings and share with you the 5 stages of loss and grief. I took a moment to pull this off the computer and just talk about loving kindness and working through our feelings for Bud and at our loss, and what stages you may go through. You may remember that Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was a doctor in Chicago, 1969, published a book on death and dying, and she had enumerated through her consultation service her own experience in the 5 stages, as she saw them, of grief and loss. And immediately the chord was struck. It was like a genius had said something. Everyone saw what she saw, and we understood, yes, there are 5 stages of loss. And Bud, I think, from the beginning, knew some of that. I remember his mother living with us, now buried at Heavener Cemetery. His father living with us, now buried at Heavener Cemetery. And of course, and now all too soon, at 68, his own death. But these stages, we decided to do a program together our Sunday school class on the stages of death and dying. And we imagined that we would videotape it and that we would invite through the newspaper and through the new radio and TV people who might want to come. And we didn't know whether we'd have 20 people or what number we might have. But Bud was convinced we would succeed if we did this. And lo and behold, we ended up, I think, with over 125 people in a Sunday school class that went on for a number of weeks and took apart in detail each of these stages of death and dying. How did I know, and how did any of us know, that someday we would be working through these stages in relationship to Bud? Basically, the first one is denial and isolation. There is a time where we deny that someone's gone. It just is too much to think about, really. And yet Bud himself was isolating himself from us in a way. I remember as he had his stroke and his illness, I visited him a few times that I could while he was in a rehabilitation facility there in Jane Lew. And I would be coming from the VA where I was doing consultation, and I would stop for a while. And he would be quiet. He would be in his bed meditating, might have his eyes closed. He was not out of it or anything like that, but just in a sense, a splendid isolation. That's what I was sensing, not the man in the middle of the fray and fighting the battle and standing strong, but just a meditative moments. And he was withdrawing from our society, from everyone in a way, but not in a depressed way, but I just want to call it a splendid isolation. And it was a preparation for what we now endure here in the midst of July. When we thought at that time it was just going to be recovery phase and Bud would be around for a long time. After all, his parents lived to be ripe, old people, and why not Bud? There's a second stage, as Dr. Kubler-Ross highlights, is anger. Yes, there's always something we wonder about could have been done. What could we all have done? Could we have all eaten better food? Could we have had more exercise opportunities? Could we have controlled our blood pressure better? Could doctors have done something more to help Bud? All these things come to mind. There's a little bit of anger at the time of loss. It's a personal process, and it's not a blame game at all. But that's a process we go through, and I imagine we'll all go through that in one way or another as we think about Bud's life. There's a bargaining stage that we go through, and it's going to take me a while to go through all of these. In fact, it's allowed. Doctors have studied this a lot. It's allowed that it's a normal process for a couple years to get through these stages. In the old days, people used to wear black, and so that was a way they would announce they're in mourning. It was a daily reminder as they put on black, or maybe a black armband or some symbol of black, and they wore that every day for a year as a symbol that they were working through these stages. But there's a bit of bargaining that goes on when we lose someone. If only I had done this, if only I had done that, if I had only been a better person. But I want to say, in relationship to Bud Wellings, that this scripture, which we used in mourning him and at the funeral home from Micah 6:8, what does the Lord require of you? To seek justice, as I've explained about his interest in PTSD and helping me, and to love kindness. Bud wanted to do anything he could to help our community, to help children, to help expand ministry, to help expand song. He loved kind and gentle things for such a big man. One of the projects yet undone, and I suppose I'm bargaining now with myself, but we need to get it done, is that he was interested in improving our sound system at the First United Methodist Church, and it does need improvement so that people who get older can hear better, so that if there's a broadcast ministry that comes out from the church, that it can be broadcast in first quality. And he was working on that. He'd given his own resource, his own time, and that needs to be worked out. If only he had stayed longer, we could get that done with his expertise, but it still needs to be done. A fourth stage of loss and grief has to do with depression. This is not necessarily the depression of a clinical person coming to a doctor like myself and saying, I'm suicidal, or I'm homicidal, I'm depressed horribly, but rather it's a sadness that things have changed, that when we wake up in the morning now, there's no more Bud Wellings that we can talk to. Yes, we can understand he's in a better place, that there's a reward for his belief, his believing in the saving blood of Jesus, that he's saved by grace, and that he belongs to God. I think of Abraham Lincoln, that when Abraham Lincoln died, that it was said, I think, that he belonged to the nations, that he a greater person than most of us, and someone who had lived among us. So we'll be depressed, we'll be sad about what has happened. And then finally, from this, taking something off the email, off the Googling it, another phrase that's kept into our time, thanks to Bud Wellings and people who led us into electronic era, the final stage of acceptance. We reach at morning time. Not everyone gets here, but where we go through a period of time where we have a deep personal and singular experience, and we accept what has happened to us, and that God is good all the time. All the time God is good. And so the final part of this is from Micah 6:8. What does God require of you? To seek justice and love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. To walk humbly with your God. It's a profound statement, isn't it? That we need to keep walking. Those who have some more walking to do. Yesterday, I went out to the graveyard. I wanted to walk out to the graveyard, and when my mother passed away, and then my father passed away, I made it a ritual and a part of my day to walk out to the graveyard every day for a year. I didn't have to do that. There's no requirement working out grief to do that, but I wanted to experience all the feelings I wanted to experience, and I could do that best by walking. And I could think of Bud and walking humbly with God. He and Linda had been able to buy the land that they cherish there on Brushy Fork, and we were able to buy a farm out near Audra. And so one Sunday we wanted to show them what we had bought, and Linda and Bud came out and joined us for a walk around the property. Now, walking humbly with God is really what I'm talking about, but I want to share with you just how I could see Bud working and thinking and sharing with us. First of all, he was dressed more formally than I would have, but characteristically that's the way I saw Bud. Almost his pastoral role. I mean, I think he had dress shoes on that day, but we enjoyed our walk, and we were able to purchase the Garden of Eden. It was a flower shop, and we had purchased the log cabin that was in, and it was installed there on the river. And Bud and Linda came down with us, and we looked at that and looked at our dreams and plans for that log cabin. And Bud snapped a picture of my wife and I standing by the cabin, which we treasure. It was an excellent picture, well framed, the colors right. Bud did it perfectly, and got us in a lovely moment. And we frame that and have it in our bedroom. It was a gift from Bud and Linda, but it picks up on my theme of walking humbly with God, and I think that's what we need to do in the next several days. So let me return to Stonewall Jackson here in closing, because Rance learned his lesson from Bud, that we are known by the company we keep. And I have learned a lesson from Bud by being able to say that I have lived and walked and talked and shared with someone greater than myself, therefore having the potential to learn from him and to capture something of the greatness and the ability that Bud was always willing to share. The great point that Jackson made, and the point that Bud Wellings made to our son Rance, is that we have insensibility contact. It's not the air, it's not the manners, it's not the vices. But it's more important that we focus on the virtues of those who we want to esteem, that we want to emulate, that we want to know better, the virtues, and even their way of thinking. Persist in keeping the best company, Stonewall Jackson said, and Bud Wellings said, and I say to you, and I think my son learned, and you will sensibly become like them. Well, I hope that that's what's happened to us. Bud and Linda living amongst us all these years, sharing their resource, sharing their talents. Bud now being one with the ages, and we'll miss him. But until the next time, this is Dr. Greenbrier thanking you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Special thanks to Channel 3 for this opportunity to come your way each week, talk about these matters of heart at that interface between Christianity and medicine. We'll see you next week.